By Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. All week, we have heard about moments in the courtroom that cause people to leave, to look away, to gasp. And there's no question that the images in a case like this are difficult to look at. But you have to wonder, based on how members of the media are reacting.
Damning and explicit text messages revealed during the David preliminary hearing day, allegedly proving the rising music star had a sexual relationship with 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. On top of the accusations that David killed Celeste, dismembered her body, and disposed of it, it's important to remember that he is also charged with sexual abuse of a child under 14. Picture a smartphone screen glowing
this case against the rising music star. Joining us now once again, Julia Dang from NBC LA, a reporter who is in the courtroom for day 4 of this preliminary hearing. Julia, this afternoon, a lot of focus on text messages between David and Celeste. Walk us through what I know.
Julia, this afternoon, a lot of focus on text messages between David and Celeste. Walk us through what I know was a very emotional final part of the day here, Chris. A lot of damning evidence today as it relates to not the murder charge, but another felony charge, in this case against David Anthony Burke. The felony count is continuous sexual abuse of a child.
Another felony charge in this case against David Anthony Burke. It's the felony count of continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14. Of course, they're talking about the murder case, 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. So we've heard descriptions of this digital evidence before. We've seen this in charging documents. We've reported on this. Prosecutors have described photos they found in David's iCloud account on his devices. They've described text messages between the two of them referencing sexual activity and things like abortion, emergency contraception. Today in court, during day 4 of this preliminary hearing, we actually got to see.
Today in court, during day 4 of this preliminary hearing, we actually got to see and read some of those text messages. Now, we did not see any explicit photos because that, of course, is child sexual abuse material. We did hear from another LAP detective who took the stand, Corey Fell, and he was charged with looking at those photos on sheets of printer paper the prosecutor handed him, and then describing verbally for the court what he saw. Detective Corey Farrell held printed
and then describing verbally for the court what he saw. And Chris, I gotta tell you, there's been a lot of distressing, disturbing, graphic evidence in this case during the preliminary hearing. I think today might have actually been the toughest day for me. I can tell you it was a tough day for the victim's parents. Her mother, Mercedes, who sat through autopsy testimony, who sat through images showing her daughter's remains in the cadaver bags. She walked out of the courtroom during this testimony today. I could hear her holding back, racking sobs. The victim's father walked out behind her.
I think it's because this is actually the first time during the course of this preliminary hearing where Celeste is being presented as a living human, a young girl who is very much alive, a young girl who has a voice, who is expressing her feelings, her wants, her needs. Before this, she was a bag of decomposing body parts. Until that afternoon, she had been remains in cadaver bags. Then the texts restored her voice. She expresses regret over the abortion. She tells him she would do anything to take it back.
She was an autopsy subject. She was a collection of limbs that had been severed from each other. But this afternoon, she became human again, as we heard about these photos and saw some images that, of course, were not child sexual abuse material that could be shown to the court. We saw Celeste at age 13 with what appeared to be a diamond engagement ring on her left ring finger. That's the finger that had David's name tattooed on it in red ink. We saw photos of the two of them kissing and cuddling in bed.
But it sounds like David is actually the one who brought up moving in together, spending more time together. A wedding again to this child. She was 13 at the time. Many of these conversations were documented having kids. He states in a text message to Celeste's number that they want 2 kids. That she was only 13. The same adult who, weeks after the documented abortion talk, is captured on body cam footage acting as if he barely knows the missing girl, eating chips, casual, distant. The texts from that same window show him pressing her bags packed. Bring everything I can't replace. He calls the runaway date the most important day of her life, second only to their anticipated wedding.
David's relationships with other women. So the text messages that were read aloud and shown to us in court today actually flip that narrative. That surprised me. I was not expecting that during testimony today. But it sounds like David is actually the one who brought up moving in together, spending more time together, a wedding, again, to this.
That's also the time period where we saw text message conversations today in court showing that David and Celeste were talking about something called OA, Operation Awesome, where they were plotting her departure, her runaway from her home in Lake Elsinore. And this struck me too. David appears to be the one pushing this. He's the one who keeps on asking her, "Do you have your bags packed?" He tells her, "Bring everything you're going to use that I can't immediately replace." The gap between the private messages and the public performance is the case's sharpest edge. One version of David is planning a future with a child. The other version is a stranger to the responding officers. That is not ambiguity. That is evidence of calculation.
Reported abortion took place. Where we just wrapped court this afternoon, we were looking at text messages where Celeste is now expressing regret, telling David over text that she would do anything to take that back.
And that was to your point about it just kind of today, you're hearing Celeste in her own words for the first time. And we knew that
And the text you have here, this is from March 2025. So this is roughly a month, maybe 2 months before she passes away. And Celeste appears to be the one trying to move on post-breakup. She says she is okay with staying friends, but she doesn't want to be connected online. She isn't interested in continuing to have sex with him. And the quote from that text is without a label, which sounds way more of a casual kind of level-headed approach to their situation as to what maybe we thought ahead of time. By March 2025, the child is the one cooling the relationship. The adult is the one who earlier
she is, he's eating some chips, he's very casual about it. And it just, for as much as there's this kind of now dynamic we understand of the relationship through the text messages, I think it makes that body cam video look way more damning and kind of shows just how much he was allegedly misleading police at that point in time and acting like he didn't really know who she was, when clearly these text messages show that this relationship was at a very serious level.
Absolutely, Chris. I think it also paints a great picture of just how convincing David can be as a liar. Because when that body cam recording was taken in February of 2024, that's also the time period where we saw text message conversations today.
But today, as they were talking about the photos found on his phone and the text messages recovered from his iCloud account, I did notice him hunching over and starting to jot something down. I did notice him having whispered conversations with his attorneys at one point. This was when, and this was really tough. This was actually what prompted the victim's mother to start crying and both of her parents to walk out of the courtroom flanked by their attorney. For the first time in the hearing, the defendant writes on the yellow pad. His leg jiggles. He shrinks in the seat. The parents leave when the descriptions turn explicit. The stoic posture cracks only when the evidence turns personal.
And I believe it was the day before Valentine's Day in 2024. He calls it the most important day of her life, aside from their anticipated wedding. Again, at this time, she is only 13 years old. This is just a couple weeks after, memorialized in these text messages, she apparently had an abortion. And the prosecutor made sure to have the LAPD detective presenting this evidence read messages from Celeste to David confirming that it is his child.
And just because I'm looking at the notes here that you sent over today, and this was right before court.
So, Dr. Grant Ho, the LA County Deputy Medical Examiner, spent quite a bit of time today describing the injuries he found, describing how the penetrating wounds to the overlaying skin are associated with internal damage found inside. That includes damage to the victim's liver. He described how he used his own fingers to palpate her ribs, how he found damage or disruptions to that underlying bone, how that sits right beneath a second penetrating wound that he found on her left flank. Toxicology ruled out overdose. The findings waited months for confirmation. The examiner, a fellow at the time, worked with a trainee.
That text is without a label, which sounds way more of a casual, kind of level-headed approach to their situation as to what maybe we thought ahead of time.
Everything that I heard and saw today in court relating to this digital evidence flipped what I thought I knew about the nature of their relationship. It does not seem to me like Celeste was the one pushing for more. She's actually the one who seems a little bit more casual, a little bit more hesitant in these messages. To me, David is the one who is aggressively pursuing.
You don't know for sure if they happened seconds apart. And then defense actually insinuated today, during cross-examination of this witness, that they don't know for sure if the victim herself may have been holding the knife that stabbed her. There were a couple looks exchanged in the courtroom after Bodorsky said that, and after the witness did in fact confirm that no, he does not know due to the advanced state of decomposition of the victim's remains. The unanswered questions sit in plain view. What instrument? What sequence? What, if anything, the digital trail proves about the final hours? The sexual abuse evidence is direct. The homicide evidence is circumstantial and degraded by time and trauma to the body. She was only 13. What happens to public trust when a rising artist's private messages become the state's strongest exhibits, and the system must decide whether the same man who planned a future with a child is the same man who ended it? That is the thriller frame this preliminary hearing forces into the open.
Was actively engaged in his own defense. Today was the first time I actually noticed him using the pen or pencil in front of him and that yellow legal notepad that I keep on peeking at, trying to see if he's taking any notes. Before today, I haven't seen him writing anything down, and I've got an eye on him at all times just to see how he's reacting to what's being said about him, his actions. Nothing before today, not a single thing written down. But today, as they were talking about the photos found on his phone and the text messages recovered from his iCloud account, I did notice him hunching.
So, Dr. Grant Ho, the LA County Deputy Medical Examiner, spent quite a bit of time today describing the injuries he found, describing how the penetrating wounds to the overlaying skin are associated with internal damage found inside. That includes damage to the victim's liver. He described how he used his own fingers to palpate her ribs, how he found damage or disruptions to that underlying bone, how that sits right beneath a second penetrating wound that he found on her left flank. Toxicology ruled out overdose. The findings waited months for confirmation. The examiner, a fellow at the time, worked with a trainee. Defense pressed the limited experience with dismemberment cases. He answered carefully, qualifying every inference. When he mentioned a disruption that could theoretically come from a gunshot, he later clarified he was illustrating uncertainty, not advancing a dual weapon theory.
Straight ahead, responding when spoken to, and not giving away much with his body language or his facial expressions. Today, when they were talking about the photos, when they were talking about his pics, you could see him starting to fidget. It was like he was shrinking in his seat. He looked down at one point. I could see his right leg jiggling up and down. And I'm really curious what he wrote down. Really curious what he shared with his attorneys during that exchange, because it wasn't just one photo or two that LAPD Detective Corey Farrell described on the stand, it was a series of photos, probably dozens. It got to a point where there were so many descriptions. They were so explicit. You can see in my notes, Chris, I actually stopped describing them one by one. And I just started grouping them into categories, of genitalia, the two of them engaging in sexual intercourse. The list goes on and on. That portion of testimony went on for much longer than I expected it to. We have not even gotten to cross-examination of this witness yet.
It's an interesting observation that, because for as graphic as the images have been shown on the screen, I mean, here's Celeste, and then you think of through those text messages that at one point in time, she meant a lot to him, it seems. And yet no emotion when those graphic autopsy photos